The battlefield was silent, except for the occasional crackle of distant energy weapons and the wind whistling across the jagged terrain. Dust swirled in the orange-tinted sky, casting long, eerie shadows over the wreckage of armored vehicles and fallen alien structures. Amid the ruin, a soft, pitiful whine cut through the stillness, a sound almost too fragile to hear. Crouched behind a scorched ridge, the human observer froze. Her gaze traced the source of the sound, a lone alien wolf, its fur matted with blood and dirt, dragging itself across the rocky ground. Its limbs shook violently, and each breath came in shallow, ragged gasps. Eyes wide with desperation, it scanned the battlefield, searching for anything resembling help. No one came. The other alien soldiers, scattered in small squads across the plain, passed by without a glance. One of them muttered something sharp in their guttural language and shook their head, moving on. A medic stationed nearby tucked their instruments into their pack, avoiding the wolf as if the sight itself were contagious. "It's just a wild animal," one of the soldiers said. "Leave it. It won't survive anyway." The words hit harder than any weapon. The wolf's whine rose into a howl, roar and haunting, echoing across the broken landscape. It stumbled, half collapsing onto the jagged rocks. Dust coated its fur, the wounds on its flank and legs dark with coagulating blood. Each movement seemed like a monumental effort, yet it struggled on, as if sheer will alone could keep it alive. The human medic's stomach twisted. She had seen plenty of battlefield horrors, but something about this creature made her pause. Perhaps it was the determination in the wolf's gaze, a silent refusal to surrender, or the loneliness that seemed to envelop it. Whatever it was, she could not turn away. Not this time. From her vantage point, she observed the interactions, or lack thereof, between the wolf and the aliens around it. Their indifference was complete, almost ritualistic. No hand reached out. No healer knelt down. Some glanced briefly, then moved on, whispering excuses she couldn't translate. Risk, efficiency, orders, they all outweighed compassion. She clenched her fists. Her training as a war medic had conditioned her to act under pressure, to prioritize life wherever possible. But even that training had not prepared her for this, the helpless eyes of a creature rejected by its own kind, left to die on the battlefield. A sharp crack from above startled her, and the wolf flinched, pressing its body closer to the ground. Its breathing grew more ragged, more desperate. Each heartbeat seemed like a countdown. She wanted to sprint to it, to lift it in her arms and start treatment, but the battlefield was dangerous, and the aliens around her were watching. Intervention here would be considered a violation, maybe even insubordination. Yet the thought of letting it die, alone and abandoned, ignited something fierce inside her. Her training, her instincts, her humanity, all converged in one clear decision. She could not wait for others to act. Others had refused. Others had turned away. But she wouldn't. The wolf's howl grew weaker, more pitiful, yet still carried a note of defiance, a stubborn refusal to succumb. It shivered violently, legs trembling under its body, but it lifted its head and looked toward her. Their eyes met. A silent understanding passed between them. Survival was a long shot, but the fight was worth it. Somewhere deep in the rubble, a faint crackle of movement signaled approaching threats. Shadows shifted across the broken landscape. Every second counted, and hesitation would mean death, not just for the wolf, but perhaps for anyone foolish enough to try saving it. She took a deep breath, weighing the danger against the life in front of her. Every rule, every protocol, every order screamed for caution. But some things, some lives, demanded defiance. Her fingers itched to move, to act. The wolf's whine, now softer and more fragile than ever, pulled at something primal within her. Not pity. Not duty. A spark of recognition, life in its purest, most stubborn form, refusing to be snuffed out. The battlefield around them continued in chaotic silence, soldiers moving like ghosts over the ruins. But in that brief, suspended moment, only the wolf and the human medic existed. And she made her decision. The first step toward saving the abandoned, bleeding alien wolf was about to begin. The human medic stepped off the ridge, every movement calculated but deliberate. The ground beneath her boots crunched with loose rocks and twisted metal, echoing too loudly in the oppressive silence of the battlefield. She kept her eyes locked on the alien wolf, crouched low, trembling, but still alive. Its gaze followed her, wary yet desperate, like it somehow knew someone had finally noticed. She kept her hands open and empty, showing no threat. The wolf's ears flicked back, and it gave a tentative whine. For a moment, everything hung in balance, the air heavy with tension, the distant echo of battle, and the soft rhythm of its fading breath. Behind her, the alien soldiers continued their patrol, indifferent as ever. One of them paused mid-step and stared at her. Its eyes were sharp, assessing, perhaps trying to decide if her interference was acceptable. The human ignored them. She had seen too many times how hesitation killed lives, and this was no time for diplomacy. "Easy, it's okay," she whispered under her breath, though she doubted the wolf understood. Her voice was calm, measured, a voice she had learned could soothe frightened patience, whether human or otherwise. Slowly, she lowered herself closer, maintaining eye contact, her hands moving in gentle, deliberate motions. The wolf shifted slightly, its breathing ragged. Blood had matted its fur in thick, dark patches, and its wounds were open and raw. She could see torn muscles along its hind leg and a gash across its flank, pulsing faintly with every heartbeat. If she didn't act fast, infection, or worse, would claim it before she even had a chance. She reached into her pack, retrieving a compact medkit, its design human but adaptable. Bandages, antiseptics, pain suppressants, all the tools she could use to stabilize the creature long enough to move it. Her hands moved swiftly, cleaning away the worst of the dirt and grime from its wounds. The wolf flinched, but she didn't recoil. Instead, she pressed a hand gently to its shoulder, murmuring soothing words, letting it know she meant no harm. The soldiers watching finally shifted, murmuring among themselves. Some shook their heads, others muttered warnings. "It's not ours," one said sharply. "You shouldn't." She didn't respond. Words were useless here. Action alone mattered. A sudden tremor ran through the wolf. Its body shuddered violently, and its weak legs buckled beneath it. The medic acted without hesitation. She leaned forward, gently but firmly supporting its chest and hindquarters, feeling the tension in its muscles, the fragile life that clung stubbornly to its body. "You're going to be okay," she whispered. "I've got you." It wasn't trust yet. That came slowly, in the tiniest gestures, a flick of an ear, a slow exhalation, a softening of the eyes. But it was enough. The wolf allowed her to touch it, allowed her to assess its injuries, to begin treating the gaping wounds. Time was slipping away. She had to move fast. Carefully, she applied antiseptic to the open gash, her fingers working methodically, cleaning away the grime while avoiding unnecessary pressure that could cause more pain. She wrapped the torn flesh with bandages, securing them gently but firmly, all the while speaking softly. The wolf's body relaxed slightly, its breathing steadier than before. Not much, but enough to give her hope. She had stabilized it, for now. But this was only the beginning. Moving it across the battlefield without alerting hostile forces would be the true test. And then came the sound that made her heart jump. Distant footsteps, heavier and faster than before. Enemy patrols, likely drawn by the noise of her movements and the wolf's pained whines. She had no time to lose. Gently, she lifted the wolf, cradling it against her chest. Its head rested on her shoulder, its small whines soft but persistent. Every step was a careful negotiation with the terrain, with the rocks and debris, and with the soldiers around her who watched silently, unsure if they should intervene. "Hang on," she murmured, more to herself than to the wolf. "We're getting out of here." The battlefield stretched endlessly, a harsh and unforgiving landscape. But for the first time in what felt like an eternity, there was movement toward hope. The wolf was not alone anymore. Someone had stepped in. And that someone was her. She didn't yet know the full danger she had stepped into, nor the consequences of defying orders, ignoring the warnings, and reaching out to a creature deemed expendable. But in that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the danger. Not the scorn of the others. Only the fragile life in her arms. Somewhere deep in the wreckage, beyond the fire and smoke, the wolf gave a faint, almost imperceptible nuzzle. Not trust, not yet, but a recognition. And for the human medic, that was enough. The battlefield stretched ahead like a scar across the planet, littered with the remnants of broken machines, smoldering craters, and the occasional twisted alien body. The human medic moved carefully, the alien wolf cradled against her chest. Its breathing was shallow but steadier than before. Every step was a battle between urgency and caution. One misstep could send them both tumbling into disaster. Shouts rang out in the distance, carried by the wind. The wolf's ears flicked, and it let out a soft, pained growl. She adjusted her grip, pressing a gentle hand to its side, feeling the rapid pulse beneath its fur. Time was slipping away. The injuries were severe, and each second that passed increased the risk of infection, shock, or collapse. Her mind raced. There was a safe zone nearby, a medbay set up behind a ridge, protected by barriers and out of the main battlefield. It would be a short distance if the terrain hadn't been so treacherous. Rocks jutted from the ground like jagged teeth, and the smoke and dust obscured visibility, turning every step into a potential hazard. One miscalculation could spell disaster. Suddenly, a pulse grenade detonated nearby, sending a shockwave through the ground. The wolf yipped sharply, pressing its head against her chest. She stumbled but caught her balance, adjusting her footing quickly. The blast was a warning. Enemy forces were near. They were moving faster than she had anticipated. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice steady despite the pounding of adrenaline in her veins. "We're almost there." As she moved, the wolf shifted slightly, leaning into her. Its body was warm, fragile, but alive. She could feel every heartbeat, every shiver, every flicker of life fighting against the odds. It was an unspoken bond forming, a connection forged in desperation and trust. But the battlefield was unforgiving. From a ridge above, alien patrols appeared, scanning the area for survivors or intruders. One spotted her, pointing sharply in her direction. Her chest tightened. If they fired, she couldn't risk putting the wolf in the line of sight. Instinct took over. She veered into a narrow canyon, the walls rising on either side to hide them from view. The wolf whimpered but remained still in her arms, sensing her urgency. She moved quickly, taking advantage of the cover, but the path was uneven, filled with jagged rocks and debris. Every step was painful, every movement a negotiation with gravity and the wounded body in her arms. A sharp cry erupted from behind. She didn't look back, couldn't. One glance could cost them both their lives. The wolf shivered against her, and she whispered soothingly, "Almost there. Just a little further." Her lungs burned, her legs screamed with fatigue, but she refused to falter. The medbay had to be reached. If she could just make it there, the wolf might survive. But danger was closing in faster than she anticipated. Enemy drones hummed above, scanning with harsh, red beams of light. She could hear the faint clicks of their targeting systems, and she knew they had been spotted. Then came the first real panic. The wolf's body went limp in her arms. Its breathing had slowed dangerously. She froze for a split second, terror clawing at her chest. "No, not now," she hissed, adjusting her grip, feeling its fragile ribs rise and fall beneath her hands. She pressed a small stimulant injector against its side, releasing a controlled dose into its bloodstream. Its body twitched, weak but responsive. "Good, hold on, just hold on," she murmured, urgency sharpening her every movement. Sweat stung her eyes, mixing with dirt and blood as she continued forward, navigating the treacherous terrain. Each step was a gamble, but stopping was not an option. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she reached the edge of the ridge. Below, partially obscured by smoke, lay the medbay. Safe. Protected. A chance at life. She glanced down, the wolf's body still fragile in her arms. It had made it this far. But safety was never guaranteed. Enemy patrols were still on the horizon, their presence a constant threat. She had to move quickly, strategically. There was no time to rest, no time to hesitate. Every heartbeat counted, not just hers, but the wolf's. With a deep breath, she began the final descent, calculating each step, balancing the wolf carefully against her body. One misstep could send them both tumbling into the jagged rocks below, a fall that would end everything. But she pressed on, driven by determination, empathy, and an unshakable sense of duty. The medbay was close enough to see now, the faint glow of emergency lights cutting through the haze. She could feel the wolf's body responding to the treatment, however faintly. Every movement forward was a victory, every careful step a defiance of the chaos around them. They were not safe yet. But for the first time, hope glimmered on the battlefield, fragile, fleeting, but undeniable. The race against time was far from over. The medbay's entrance loomed ahead, its reinforced doors glowing faintly under emergency lights. The human medic moved with deliberate caution, every step carefully calculated to keep the alien wolf stable in her arms. Its body, though weakened, seemed to sense safety, its trembling slowing slightly, its shallow breaths growing steadier. But this was no time for relief, every movement still mattered. Once inside, she set the wolf down on a padded medical table. The faint hum of energy panels and the soft beeping of monitors filled the room, contrasting sharply with the chaos outside. For the first time, she had a chance to assess the wolf properly. Its eyes followed her, wary and cautious. There was no overt trust yet, but there was recognition, a faint acknowledgement that she had saved it from death. She knelt beside it, opening her medkit with practiced efficiency, and began to treat its wounds more thoroughly. As she cleaned and dressed the gashes along its flanks, the wolf shifted slightly, leaning into her touch. A soft, tentative nuzzle against her hand made her pause. She froze, heart racing. It was subtle, but unmistakable, the first sign of connection. "You're stronger than you look," she murmured softly, her voice steady but gentle. "You're going to make it. I promise." The wolf tilted its head, ears flicking, eyes meeting hers with a strange intensity. For a moment, it almost seemed to understand her words, not in their literal meaning, but in their intent. Life. Safety. Protection. It was a fragile, unspoken dialogue that needed no translation. She worked methodically, stitching torn muscles, applying analgesics to dull the pain, and wrapping bandages with precision. Every movement was careful, respectful, never rushed. She had learned long ago that fear and pain could break a patient's will, whether human or alien. This wolf was fragile, but its spirit was unyielding. Hours passed. The medbay was quiet, the distant battlefield reduced to muffled echoes and vibrations. Outside, soldiers came and went, bringing news of skirmishes and casualty reports, but here, time seemed suspended. She continued her work, pausing occasionally to speak softly to the wolf, to reassure it with tone and touch rather than words. Then, a remarkable change occurred. The wolf, which had initially flinched at every movement, now pressed its head closer to her hand. It nudged her gently, almost insistently, as if demanding the comfort it had never known. She laughed softly, a sound of disbelief and relief, feeling the tension in her chest ease slightly. "You're stubborn," she whispered. "But I like that about you." As night fell over the medbay, a quiet bond formed between them. The wolf, once a creature of pure instinct and raw survival, began to relax in her presence. Its breathing grew more even, its movements less erratic. She could feel the faint pulse of life strengthening beneath her fingers, a rhythm that matched her own in some uncanny, reassuring way. For the first time, she allowed herself to study it, not just its injuries, but its form, its behaviors, the subtle intelligence in its eyes. She saw the traces of its past life, the lean muscle of a hunter, the scars of battles fought, the loyalty that had kept it alive through countless trials. This was no mere animal, it was a being shaped by hardship, and it had recognized her as an ally when all others had turned away. The wolf's eyes closed briefly, and she noticed a soft exhalation, almost a sigh. It was trust, not complete but growing. A connection forged in survival, but now strengthened by care. She reached out, brushing a strand of matted fur from its face, and felt a warmth in return, a faint nuzzle against her fingers. Somewhere deep inside, she realized this was no longer just about duty or protocol. This was about respect. Recognition. Compassion. It was about seeing life, alien, strange, and entirely different, and refusing to turn away. Hours later, when the wolf finally rested, she leaned back against the wall, exhausted but alert. The bond between them was subtle, unspoken, but undeniable. In the midst of war, of indifference and danger, they had found something rare: connection, trust, hope. Outside, the distant battlefield continued its endless chaos, but inside the medbay, a fragile sanctuary existed, a place where life mattered, where the human medic and the alien wolf had chosen each other. And in that moment, she understood something profoundly simple. Sometimes, the greatest courage wasn't in facing an enemy or surviving a battle. It was in reaching out when everyone else refused, in defying fear and protocol, and in giving life a chance when death seemed inevitable. The wolf opened its eyes slowly, meeting hers once again. This time, there was no fear. Only recognition. Only the beginning of a bond that would carry them both through whatever came next. The alarm lights in the medbay flickered, painting the room in harsh red and orange hues. Outside, the battlefield was still alive with chaos. Reports came in of enemy patrols advancing toward the medbay's location, and distant explosions rattled the walls. Time had never felt more urgent. The human medic stood beside the alien wolf, now more alert and responsive, its eyes tracking every movement she made. She checked its bandages again, ensuring the wounds were stable, and applied the last of her field-grade stimulants. The wolf's breathing was stronger now, its limbs no longer trembling as violently. But it wasn't enough to consider it safe. The medbay could only hold them for so long, and if the enemy discovered this location, survival would be impossible. "We have to move," she murmured, her voice steady but filled with urgency. The wolf tilted its head, as if understanding her words in the way only a creature saved from death could. It rose slowly to its feet, wobbly but determined, leaning against her for support. Every step outside would be a gamble. The path to true safety lay across open ground, exposed and patrolled. One wrong move could attract fire, one misstep could undo all her efforts. But she had already defied orders, already risked censure, already ignored the warnings. Turning back was not an option. With the wolf by her side, she moved through the medbay's corridors, then slipped into the shadows of the exterior walls. The battlefield stretched ahead, jagged and unforgiving, but she had memorized every obstacle on her earlier route. Carefully, she guided the wolf over broken debris, through smoke-filled trenches, and around patrols. Each movement was silent, calculated, a delicate dance of survival. From above, enemy drones hummed, scanning the area with red beams that cut through the haze. The wolf flinched at each pass, but she pressed a hand to its shoulder, murmuring reassurance. Together, they moved in sync, predator and protector, survivor and healer, navigating danger with a fragile but unbreakable bond. A sudden burst of fire erupted nearby. A squad had discovered a breach. She ducked behind a wrecked transport, pulling the wolf close. Its body pressed against hers, tense but alive. Heart hammering, she whispered, "Almost there. Don't let go now." The wolf's eyes met hers, glowing faintly in the firelight. There was a question there, a flicker of fear, but also trust, hard-earned and precious. Minutes, or hours, it was impossible to tell. Later, the edge of a reinforced transport vehicle marked the threshold of safety. Beyond it lay an extraction zone, a heavily guarded area where she could finally secure medical care for the wolf and herself. But the final stretch was across open ground, entirely exposed. She inhaled deeply, weighing every risk, then made her move. The wolf limped beside her, its body lean but resilient. She whispered, "We go together. You with me." And they ran. Fast, desperate, hearts pounding in sync with each step. Laser fire zipped past them, scorching the ground and sending sparks flying. The wolf stumbled, but she steadied it, pushing forward without hesitation. Finally, the extraction zone came into view. Friendly soldiers, alerted to their arrival, opened fire on pursuing enemies, providing cover. The wolf, sensing safety, broke into a determined, ragged sprint. She followed, cradling it when it faltered, never letting go. At last, they reached the perimeter. The wolf collapsed into a shallow trench, exhausted but alive. She knelt beside it, feeling its pulse and checking the bandages one last time. For the first time since the battlefield encounter, a measure of relief washed over her. "You made it," she whispered, tears streaking her dirt-smudged face. "You really made it." The wolf lifted its head, eyes meeting hers. There was no fear, no pain in that gaze, only recognition, gratitude, and an unspoken promise. She had defied orders, risked everything, and reached across species, across worlds, to save a life that no one else valued. And in return, the wolf had survived, carrying the bond forged in fire and blood. Outside, the battlefield still raged, but inside this small sanctuary, victory was simple and profound. Life had won. The human medic leaned back, exhaustion pressing against her body, but satisfaction warmed her chest. She looked down at the wolf, now resting, its breathing steady and even. They had both survived the impossible, not just through skill or strength, but through courage, empathy, and a refusal to turn away. Somewhere in the chaos of war, a quiet truth emerged. Compassion could defy even the odds, and a single act of bravery could ripple across worlds. The wolf nudged her hand, a silent thank you, a bond sealed by survival and trust. And she knew, without doubt, that neither of them would ever forget this day. The battlefield had been cruel. The odds had been stacked. But against all of it, they had defied death itself. And that was more than enough.